here's some things for you. I'm going to introduce the bat system to you. Now, we don't normally use bats in this class, and there's a couple of reasons why. One, I don't have enough for everyone. Two, they take up so much room. And if they take up room on your shelves, that's a big problem. But I'm going to show you how you can use it. Now, these are bats. There's some more up there, so there's some more over there. But they have bat pins. Now, if you've ever wondered what those holes in the wheel head are, they're for bat pins. And they just drop straight down. And for my lids, I'm going to not put in on my wing nuts. But if I was going to throw something larger, or something that's like a larger lid, or a larger bowl that I want to take off, I would put my bat pins on, because it will rattle around just a little bit. Now, for you, the importance of understanding bats and bat pins, you can use them all you want, but you have to put them back. And they're going to go, everyone look where I'm pointing. There's the window, and right next to there's 4 little cups hanging. They're going to go in the far cup. And there are bat pins, and there are wing nuts. Now, if I start finding these being let around or left out, I'm just going to make them all disappear. Because, one, they're about $2 a set, which doesn't seem like a lot, but after 8 sets disappear, it's like, oh, that's a lot of money, right? Second, if you leave these out and then somebody goes to pick up their clay, and then it goes into the pugger, then it goes back in, and then see how that's a problem. So you have to, if you're going to use these, and you don't actually have to, I'm going to show you ways to not use them as well. You've got to put them back. So they've got to go up in that little cup over there. That's also so we know where they're at. So that. But we're going to get to bats in a minute. All right. I'm going to start with a little thing of clay, and I'm going to throw a couple of cylinders or bodies first, the jars. And let's just do a basic. Let's do like a number 4, if you have your sheet, so it tells us kind of what we're doing. Oh, another thing to introduce you to is calipers. Okay, I have a couple of sets. There's one hanging, and that's usually where I put them. If you can't find them, they're probably on the floor by the wheels. But these are calipers, and they're for measuring. Okay, I'm also going to show you how to measure with a wood knife. Now, as you're making, if we only have 2 of these, you can't take somebody's calipers if they're measuring, because if you change it, their measurement's gone. Okay, does that make sense? It will in a minute if it doesn't. Okay, we're gonna go ahead and set them just to my left under the bag. This clay's been sitting out since last class, so it's a little stiff. Probably has an air bubble. They probably didn't wedge it as good as you two did. Okay, I'm gonna open it. Yeah, this is. I'm just gonna get rid of that. The thing about making lidded containers, your piece has to be really centered on the wheel. Otherwise, it's going to cause you some problems. Okay, that feels better. Here, just chuck it. It's okay. Soft air bubbles are better than hard air bubbles. So I'm going to push that down. If you ever have clay that has air bubbles, just cone it or wedge it more on the wheel. Now if you notice, I'm not actually coning, I'm just refining it. With this amount of clay, you don't have to go up very far. Okay, we're going to open it. Now, which one are we doing? Number 4? Okay, so number 4 is going to come up and then bend in a little bit, and then the rim, or in this case we're going to call it a flange, it's going to come straight up. It doesn't have to have a lot of shape to it. So we're going to lift this. Make sure you kind of guide it to the center. Going to lift this some more. Okay. I'm going to, yeah, you can just come and set it. I'd have you throw it, but my hands are wet now. Then I'd rate you and Marcus, see who has a better toss.
I'm gonna put this one. Oh, it's probably gonna be me.
Okay. Well, we'll never know. I mean, not today. Okay, I'm gonna rib the outside. Because before we stretch anything out, we should rib it. Rib it. Like a little froggy. Okay, add some water on the inside. I'm gonna come in here. I'm going to push out, lift up a little bit. Bring that back in. Just trying to decide what I want to do. Oh, that slumped. That sucked. Huh. Well, maybe I should have gone with recycled clay. If you haven't thrown with V-Mix, it throws different than recycled. Okay, let's try that again. Great part about clay is right there. We can just start over. So I just turned it, I pushed it too thin. Anyone ever push their clay too thin? Just one? No one else wants. Oh, 2, 3, 4, 5. Hey, are you making a fire pit and welding? Yeah. I saw it last night. I'm making a propane fire pit. It's going to be a drop-in, so I don't really need much. And then hopefully next week I'm going to weld up a square frame for a new fiber blanket kiln. And hopefully we can use that. So fiber blanket is fire blanket. It's like 2.5 inches thick, and it holds in heat. So they use it for forges and kilns and stuff like that. It's like a knit polyester. Well, it's not polyester, but a knit fiber. So I can run temperatures up to I think 1900 degrees on the fire blanket. Okay, I won't go as extreme on this. I'm going to come in just a little bit, thin that out. That'll be great right there. Take the water out of the inside. Going to clean up the outside. Is there anyone in here who has not played around with their metal rib? You used to play around with your metal rib. Compressing your clay is vital. One, it tells you what your shape actually is. Two, it compresses it so that you can take it off easier. And it helps the shape. If you can control your metal rib, and I'm going to show you this in a second, you can really kind of push your clay pretty firmly. Okay, I'm going to clean out the bottom. Again, I'm not trying to be overly dramatic with this one, so I don't screw it up again like a noob. Okay, and before I cut it and take it off, I need to measure. Now, we have to decide what we're going to do with our rim. So, on this one, if we're doing number 4 exactly, I measure just the outside, because the outside of my rim will be the inside of my bowl that I make. If I'm going to do number 2, I'm going to measure 2 things, and one is an exact measurement and one is an eyeball. And number 2, I'm going to measure the inside, and I usually do it while it's spinning. The inside, because that's where my flange is going to go. And then I just kind of know that about a little bit out of there is going to be the center, and I want to measure the center. If I was doing number 5, which also has just a straight up and down jar, I'm going to measure the center of my piece, because that's what's important. So kind of look at those things. So I'm going to do a number 2 lid on this. So I'm going to measure the inside. And then I'm going to cut this off. Now, I want you to think for a second what I said about inside, outside, and how big. So if I'm going to do the inside, do I want my lid to be exact, a little loose, or a little tight? Tight. So I would call it an exact. You want it exact, which is actually going to make it a little tight. And the reason for that is I can always take it off, but if you make it loose, if you trim it at all, it's going to wobble around inside of there, and you don't want that. So I'm going to set that aside. So let's do that lid. I'm going to need about half this amount of clay. Now, if you open up your packet, there's other diagrams on the inside. If you look at this one right here, okay, that is the lid I'm going to make, and it is a trimmed knob with a flanged base, okay? So it's the second one down. It says throwing lids on the bottom, so other sheet. There is one on that one too, but if you look at it, I'm creating a gallery on my lid. This will be your first take on galleries. It's basically a bowl, but I'm going to throw or leave extra clay at the base so that I can trim up a knob later. And we will do that on Tuesday, the trimming part. So I'm going to center this, so I'm going to center this a little bit taller than normal. Okay, and because I took my measurements, what did I measure to? The inside, so this is going to be the outside of the flange. So if you look at that, do you see how it comes out, sorry, it goes in and then it drops down? This part right here is the measurement of the inside of my piece, not the flat part. The flat part is just what sits, and I don't really care about that so much as long as there's a little bit there. So I'm going to come in here and just get my basic idea, and look at that, I got plenty of clay. That'll be the inside. So I'm going to throw a little bowl This might even still be a little too much clay. But you know the old saying, too much, too little, whatever.
Never have too much.
Never have too much? That's not true. Enough is never enough. The Greatest Showman. Is that where that comes from?
I
was quoting over the head.
Oh.
Yeah.
My bad.
Very good.
Okay, so I created this. I'm going to flatten this. Now I want you to look. If this is the inside of my piece, I'll pull this up so you can see it. I want the outside to go in there. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to split this rim. Okay? It's going to be super amazing. You're going to be like, holy crap. So I want my rim right now and this measurement to be twice as thick. So I'm just going to gently set that down. Do you see that little line? Now I'm going to come in with my wood rib right there. And you can use a finger. Fingernails work if you have them. But I like my wood rib. Now, you've got to think upside down. So I want a flat part, and then I want something sticking up, because that's going to go down into my piece. So I have that little line. I'm going to come right here and just gently press that down. Does that look kind of like what your drawing looks like on your paper? So there's a flat part, and then it has, and that flat part's the gallery, and then it has the sticking part, which is the flange. Is that making sense? And then I'm going to come in, I'm going to check that. So the outside of this is the inside of this. So I'm going to come in here and go, oh look, that's just a little bit tight, which is good. I'm just going to gently taper that in. And the reason why I taper it, if it is straight up and down, I have to get it exact into my piece. If there's a taper, it'll go in, I can be a little bit off, and it'll slide it right into place. So we taper that just a little bit. A good example of that is, and we'll do this on our piece here in a second, is the number 1. Do you see how that flange is tapered out pretty heavily from the gallery? So right there. Okay, I'm going to trim up just a little bit because my knob's not going to be that big. Or maybe it is. I mean, there's all kinds of crazy stuff you can do with knobs. If you don't want to trim a knob, and you don't have to, you can throw a knob onto it. You can create a knob off the wheel and add it to it. On a small piece like this, it could just be nice and round and not have a knob at all. So lots of cool things there. So I checked that. I'm going to double check my measurements because I can trim this up later. But that's going to go about 2/3 half down. And so I'll only have to trim it up just the tiniest bit, and that'll be good. Now, I'm going to cut this off. And I'm going to show you how this fits. So this is going to, that's a big knob right now, but it's going to drop right down in there. Okay, so this is what holds it in place on top so it doesn't fall in. And this was what holds it in place so it doesn't wobble back and forth. Okay, this can be trimmed up, this can be trimmed up, the inside can be trimmed up if you need to. There's all kinds of things we can do with that. Does that make enough sense for now? Let's do it again with a different one. So this one we're going to do we're going to do number 1. So number 1 is a container that has a flanged rim and just a basic bowl or a flat top or lid. Something to be mindful of, your rim and right below your rim on any thrown piece needs to stay thick or thicker. So 3/8 of an inch, 2 of your wood knives is a good thickness. So you can split that, maybe even a little thicker than that. Okay, something on the requirements here. Remember, you get to choose hand-built wheel thrown. They need to be made well. You need to clean them up. They need to have embellishments and surface things done to them. We're going to learn some more of that on Thursday. I am not requiring you to make shapes. So if you don't want it to round out, it can be straight up and down cylinder, and it's perfectly acceptable. Making lids is complex enough. So as I get up to the top, I'm going to keep my rim fairly thick. Actually, I lied. We're going to make, we got some time. We're going to make like number 7 or a number 8. So we're going to bring this out and then bring it in. And these are kind of fun. These are what I would call decorative jars. You could call them like potpourri or incense jars because you can put a scent in them, then you can put a lid on them to kind of stop the scent from coming out and then open it back up when you want it to. And this is not like a burning incense jar, but okay, I'm going to rib this. My metal rib, wherever that's at, right there. Then I'm going to add some shape to it. If you want, and instead of adding a lot of water, you can put 2 sponges in your hands, one on the inside, one on the outside. And you can shape without adding a lot of water on the inside. So right here, because if we're looking at, say, number 7 or 8-ish, right in there, I'm going to be lifting and pushing out, but I want to continue that curve inward. So I don't want to, I mean, I did stop, but I don't want to stop and then be like, I'm going to come up here and push this in. I actually want this to come together, and then I'm going to bring this in and push this pretty heavily inward. Always feeling for what the clay is willing to let you do. And that's about right. Let go slowly. And then from here, I'm going to rib it again. So flat part hits the round part. And because there's nothing gouging, I'm going to just keep going up. Now, depending on what shape you're going for, I'm going to round this out just a little bit more. I can use my 2 sponges again. In this case, I'm going to use one on the inside and my rib on the outside. I'm going to push towards my rib. It helps to compress it while I go. Right here, I'm going to flip so that my round side is now pointed in. I'm going to support on the inside, and I'm going to push pretty hard to drop this. And right there, if you look at what numbers we were doing, number 7, that's about a number 7, right? The rim is just sitting there. It's not pushed in. Number 8 and number 9 creates a gallery. And so if I want to do that, I can come in here and push down and create this little round gallery. And there's lots of lids you can put here, but the best ones are going to be like a number 8 or number 9, where there's a little bit of a flange that goes down in there. So let's do that real quick. Gonna measure that. Tate, do you see how dry my piece looks?
Yeah.
That's what ribbing does. And if your pieces are wet and you're having a hard time getting them off, you're just not ribbing enough. Okay. We're going to measure this. Now, a couple of measurements. I have that whole scoop area, and it just depends on what you want to accomplish there. I think we're going to do the lid number 8 for this. Those are kind of fun. So I'm going to measure the inside, because that's what's going to sit down, and then I'm just going to take an eyeball and measure the outside. Another thing I could do, I could come in with my wood knife and I could measure across, grab my needle tool, and I'm just going to create a line there so I can basically tell where that needs to be. Because I talked to you about you can't change the measurements mid, you take one measurement and that's what you got. Which means if I set this over here and somebody picks it up and measures their piece, and I've already taken this off the wheel, I'm gonna have a problem. So be mindful if you feel like somebody's been using the calipers, to ask them if you can take them. They're probably done, they might not be. So I'm gonna take this off. Now, throwing a number 8 is kind of like throwing a bowl, but we're gonna throw a knob at the same time. It's gonna be so much fun. Set that there. And just a tiny bit of clay. Yeah, that'll be good. Tiny bit of clay. Centering small is kind of hard. But gonna measure. What's that measurement? Do you remember? It's to the inside of my piece, which means it's the outside bottom part. So I'm just checking here, and this is going to be an eyeball sort of a thing. So on this, I'm going to come in here and I'm going to split this. Like that. If I wanted to, I could make that hollow. It's small enough, I don't need to. I could make it a little bit more knob-like or decorative, so it has a little bit more of a handle. Like that. Okay, I'm going to double check some measurements. So where my little goalie is where the bottom's going to be. So from here, and I'm not going to do all of this right now because I'm actually going to flip it over and trim it later, is I'm going to come in here and just clean underneath just a little bit. Now if you remember my knife, there's my mark. I could bring that out just a little bit more if I wanted to. We will. We'll just pull this out just a tiny bit more. Also something that can be trimmed up. Now, a third thing you need to think about is how tall do you want this to be? So if you look at my piece, there's only so much space between here and the top. Okay, and it depends on the type of lid you want, but a lot of times you want that lid to pretty much line up with my edge there. So I don't want my piece to be too thick. So that looks good to me. And that's something we can trim down just a little bit as that sits down. Okay, we're gonna, here, I'll pull this up here so you can see it. And then we'll do one more. So this one's a tough one to get off, but so that will be trimmed up and then it'll sit down in there like that. Okay, so we'll trim that so it'll drop right in. In theory, it'll hold itself in that curve, but you want it to be fairly tight. So set that aside. All right, let's do a number 1. So this is going to be a flanged jar. And then we'll really quickly do if we get to it, a bat lid. I'm only showing you bats because as beginners, sometimes lids are a little sketchy. They're a little smaller, a little harder to get off. I very rarely, when I do lids, use a bat. If my lid's gonna be really flat, I will. But they just take up so much space. Nice little wobble. If you get a wobble, if you hold steady when you pull up, a lot of times you can get rid of it. Lift that up some more. We'll just make this a nice tall canister. Keep my rim just a little bit thicker than normal. That's good. Take out the water. I'm gonna rib it real quick. And on my lid, do you remember which side I split? Which side I pushed down on? Inside or outside? That was a long time ago. It was number 2 lid. Do you remember which side I pushed down on? On the outside, because I wanted the outside to be, that's a thin spot. I'm throwing thin today. Lidded containers is not the time to throw extra thin. Anyway, the outside I wanted to be lower, or when we flip it over, higher than the inside. So on this one, I do the same thing, but opposite. If you want, you can come in here and mark your middle, like that. Then you take your wood knife, and I'm going to hold it on the inside. And this is why you need a thick rim, because if it's too thin, you're going to have some problems. And I'm just going to press down. Okay, go a little further than you think you should. As beginning lid throwers, your lids are going to be thicker than you think. It's better that they sit down in there. Okay, and if we look at number 1, if I keep this straight up and down, if my lid is exact, it's hard to get in. So what I can do is come in here, put that in the corner, and tip that out just a little bit. That way when the lid comes in there, it'll kind of bounce itself into place. Okay, clean up the outside. So if I didn't say it, and I truly do mean this, Sketches for this project are a must. I know your brains are super powerful, but thinking things through, drawing them out, will give you a better chance of having them be successful. It'll also open up possibilities where if you just go, no, I know what I need to do, and you sit on it and you just do that one thing. What if you drew it out and you got better options by drawing it out? Do that. Draw it out. Kind of like what we're doing on our daily journals. The daily journals are not just because it's fun to have you do them and it's fun to grade them. They're actually there for a reason. Oh, what did I do? I didn't measure. So we'll measure this. Right there. And I'm going to pull that off. We have 5 minutes. So we're going to put some bat pins in real quick. And then there's 2 sides. There's a short side and a long side for these. This one happens to be the 3 versus the 1. There's little dots. And we're just going to set that on there. It takes a second to figure out how to do it. Get one end, get the other end, give it a good smack. That should be good. And then which one are we doing? The number 1. So in this case, we're going to throw a knob. Now there might be a little bit of a wobble in here. Don't fight it, just go with it, it'll be fine. So this is going to be a bowl. Oh no, this is going to be the thick bottom. We haven't thrown a knob yet, have we? Yeah, we'll throw a knob on this. We'll make this a flat piece. So I'm going to push this out. So there's plenty of clay to just lay in there. We'll trim that up. And then I'm going to throw a knob. Now, if your knob's going to be big, it needs to be hollow. So we're going to push this all the way to the bottom, so that it goes all the way through. And then we're going to throw this, and then I'm going to close it off in a second. Depending on what you want to do with it, there's all kinds of fun stuff. We're going to add a little bit of shape to it by pushing out there, and then I'm going to bring this in and lift up as we go. Don't fall on me. Get that closed off. Oh, it decided to fall. Compress that. Come back in here. All right, now here's where I want to use my rib. I'm going to come at the bottom. I'm going to rib this to close it off. Anyone in here thrown any spheres or closed forms? That's what throwing this knob is, basically. And one of the great parts about it is, once it's closed, I can come in here and still manipulate it. So there's my knob. It's hollow, but it still goes all the way through. If for some reason when you take this off and you look up and you go, oh, I closed that off, because you might have, you just need to poke a needle tool through it. Come in here and play around with that. Great stuff there. Now we're going to check our measurements again. And again, I'm looking at the height between where my gallery sits and where the top of my flange is, plus then the width. And I want to cut this exact. So I'm going to come in with my wood knife. Cut that there. Just a little taper on the inside. If you're having a problem getting these things off, cut them like this. Put your needle tool under it. Start your wheel slowly. Cut underneath that. And then you can peel that right off. I do mine a lot faster than that. And sometimes it kind of jacks it up. But see how thick my walls are? I'm going to want to trim those down later, but that'll be okay. We're going to come in here, cut underneath a little bit. So it just sits right down in there, and then I'm going to clean this up. Before I take it off, I'm going to check my measurements, because if it's too thin now or too not wide enough, I certainly don't want to take it off yet. So that's good. The inside's a little bit more tapered in, which is great. I'm going to pull this up so you can see how this looks. So that goes there. Now on storing them, right now is not the time to put them together. They're so wet, they'll stick. But as soon as you can, you should. Get these trimmed up, get them put together. That way they can dry together, they can warp together if they need to. So normally I would just leave this on the bat, but that's going to sit right in there. Little throne knob. Yeah.
So what's like, do you have to use the bat?
You don't have to use the bat. As beginners, if your lid is wider, that's about the minimum or the maximum. Any wider than that, when you lift that, it's just gonna flop. So if you're gonna make a bigger something,
Is it just so it can stay on there?
it can stay on there. So normally I would just leave that because it'll flop, but all that good stuff. I'm almost certain you have an extended lunch today.
Almost.
Almost certain.
Jones, I have a question. So I glazed my piece last class Tuesday. Wednesday. Were they put in the kiln?
They are in the kiln. I haven't pulled them out yet. If you can see it, you can take it. There is an assignment for it, but I didn't even talk about that today. There's your announcement.
So do you think by 40 period they'll be out?
Probably, because I'll have time to pull stuff out. A treat? Oh, feel so loved.
Bye, Jones.
See you, bye. Have a good weekend.